Okay, what about Tikal? In some ways, this is almost an exemplar of the soulless Euro for me. It's not to say I don't enjoy it, but it evokes theme without any connection to the subject matter. I mean, right from the moment you see this, the map, and with the tiles it works perfectly well too, with its beautiful, vibrant colors. It feels as though you're out there directing these expeditions in some sort of sense, but you're not doing anything that has anything to do with directing expeditions, right? You're playing a math game, you're playing a geometry game, and not just pure geometry, because you've got the point values, the optimization, and all that going on. All the same, and I really mean it. I mean, there's nothing in this that has anything to do with excavating ruins. The whole subject matter, it works, it fits in well, it appears thematically aligned, but it's got nothing to do with the subject. And to me, that's kind of what Euros tend to be about. Hey, we've got a clever idea of how to, score points under, how to provide mechanisms that allow you to score points and compete under something that, the things that you're doing to score the points and compete have not necessarily anything to do with what you're actually doing. Now, some Euros, things like Brass or Endeavor that I've covered early on, Imperial, the 18XX games, if you're willing to allow them, I see them as sort of proto-Euros. Even, your Carcassonne or something, in some vague way it feels a little bit more connected. But here I feel like I'm playing a pure math game where I'm taking opportunistic choices, etc. And those choices don't really align with what I'm doing. What am I doing? I'm trying to ship people in there and lay claim by quantity. What? That doesn't really make a lot of sense. It's got nothing to do with how archaeology is done, how sites are apportioned, how things are decided. None of it has anything to do with it. But so what? Hey, it's a good game, right? Yeah. I think it's a fun game. I like there's this nice strategy choice that aligns between that area control, which I think is more powerful if you can do it right, versus early grabbing of treasures. There is significant player interaction here. I mean, you're throwing your own pieces in to compete with someone else's position. But it's not absolute, because whatever they do for scoring, you can score that too by just rushing in after them. Of course, there's the claiming with the putting the caps on them. I don't know what it's actually called. All I got is this little picture. Looks like a cap to me. I don't know. Yeah, it's got a term, I'm sure, in the thing. What do they call it? Putting a guard on the temple. And that's, provides you with an additional interesting choice. Do you want to sacrifice your pieces yet? Is your temple built up high enough that it's worth throwing the guard on? As you make the temple higher and higher, it becomes more and more of a target, and everybody kind of is interested in putting their own guard on it. So the guard becomes very expensive, because those are pieces you'll never get. But you'll see in the playthrough, if you go back to that, or if you watched it, you don't usually run out of pieces. I've run out at some points but usually you can find stuff in the backfields that is no longer useful to you, and you have to expend a little more, move it to a camp, and then jump it to where you need it. And that's an additional cost. And, it's all this optimization game. As an optimization game, some are just painful. This one could be. But it doesn't have to be, is kind of my feeling. That may be an entirely personal thing. So, for example, with Age of Renaissance, I find myself absolutely having to try to calculate out what I can buy and what I have to do to manage that. With this, or with Carcassonne, I'm perfectly willing to kind of play it by gut. And that's a lot more fun. I would hate playing this with someone who was really, really optimizing, though, and counting all their points. A lot of people call that analysis paralysis. I can assure you it's not. Analysis paralysis really is paralysis. You're cycling there. You're unable to make a decision because your brain is just paralyzed by the choices and the complexity of them. And that's the kind of situation I get in Age of Renaissance. Here, especially towards the end, I do feel like I could take a little time, count everything up, and maybe score an extra 2 points that way or something. Maybe do a little bit better. And as we saw with how close the game was, at least between two of the players, it can come down to that. In fact, this game was more of a blowout than I'm used to in these. When I play solitaire or against other people, I'm used to this game actually everyone kind of keeping kind of close. Red got off to a tremendous lead in my playthrough, and it's usually not that kind of game. It very seldomly is. Now, what kind of neat little things do we have in here? I mean, obviously you have so many different choices of what to do in your turn, and there's usually several different valid ones that can score you well. However, when you draw your tile at random, quite often there's an obvious optimal choice, at least for the moment. What I call that opportunistic choice. And I love doing games where, I'm handed something and I can make an opportunistic choice without thinking real hard. I don't like standing there saying, yeah, I could go this way or I could go that way. Oh, they're almost exactly the same. How do I balance that out? And I could obviously count, but not everything can be done with counting either, because there are long-term versus short-term goals. You have these short-term goals, especially as the scoring round's coming, and of course, it helps to know which letters the scoring round's going to be on. Which is a level of familiarity that I won't have with many games. And I haven't played this very much at all. But there's a level, of, okay, I could set myself up so that I'm ready when the volcano comes to score big off the temples that are in place right now. And if the volcano comes at the right point, I'll get an advantage off that. But then there are long-term things like carving out that territory that like red and black both did in my game. Going early for treasures because they will score for you again and again. You don't have to waste a bunch of your pieces to cap something. You get a pile of things that are just going to produce victory points for you all game long. And if you can get triplets, well, you saw what that did for black. Red didn't have very many, and black was able to use that along with the territory to create this kind of way of catching up, even if it wouldn't have happened under other circumstances. The limited tiles. We've got to talk about the... this is one of the few games that the insert sort of mostly works. Just don't ship it with the insert because, with the pieces not bagged or whatever, they end up all over the place in a mess. But, it really kind of sorts everything out nicely. So you have limited amounts of tiles for each temple, and that provides this sort of race to get the big numbers that you need. And then there's little choke points, like I think we saw where the 8s were out but there were people who could still build 8s, but they couldn't, there weren't any 8s left, and there were only a couple on the board. So the people who had those 8s could pretty much guarantee they would get the 9s. But then there's a race for the 10, whatever. That creates an additional little dynamic where, hey, if I control this territory and I'm pretty confident that I can cap it if I get up to maximum, I want to build those towers up as high as you can. The pulsing of the letter tiles is nice. It makes sure that the game flows out in a certain manner where the points start out kind of with low point temples, then they go to the richer temples in the mid game when you're racing against the people who've been building up the older temples, maybe to the highest levels. You've got to kind of jump on them on where they started at least, so that you can be in that race, even if you've gone from middle game strategy. What you can't do, I don't think, is go for a late game strategy here, where you're only going to grab temples at the end of the game. The problem with that is they decrease in value again, and there are no more upgrades, at least to the higher levels. And maybe not to any level. Maybe everything's been upgraded. Maybe the stuff close to the original encampment has been filled in, and there's usually a lot of temples right in that area. I want to think a little bit about the, I've never played the auction variant, and I've read some people make comments, gee, I played this game without the auction, and it was a so-so game. I like this game, but it was a so-so game, but then I played with the auction and it becomes fantastic. So what happens with the auction is you get face-up terrain hexes, and then the players bid who has the right to play first, and they get their first choice of the terrain hexagons. Now that could include a volcano triggering scoring. So that's kind of an interesting option there. The player's bid, each successive bid has to be higher. Once you pass out, you can't keep bidding. Okay. And then after the first bidder gets his turn, after the high bidder gets his turn, then, and what are you bidding? Victory points, I assume? Yeah, you start off with a pool of 20 victory points and you're going to be bidding them. And then the person who gets the second turn is also going to be determined by bidding, and he'll be bidding his points. And the last turn goes to somebody who doesn't have to pay anything. Sometimes the bids could be really important and sometimes they might not be. Scoring works clockwise from the volcano, so that doesn't change anything. The turn sequence in the final round is going to be determined by the players' scores. They take their turns in reverse score order, thereby giving a kind of balancing factor there. I think that should be actually in place for the base game as well. I think there is an unfair advantage to the person who will automatically be getting that position. There's an unfair advantage in the draw of the volcanoes, but you don't know about that from the beginning of the game. Of course, on the other hand, people who are familiar with the game can plan for that, just as they can plan for when the volcanoes are coming out or whatever. Works either way. I think the bidding definitely adds a layer of interest to it. Here's the problem with the bidding. You kind of have to pre-calculate your turn before you make your bid. That opportunism kind of goes away because you have to assess an additional layer of, yeah, if I take that right now, I get a bonus, but how big is that bonus over what I'm likely to get on the second turn? Because maybe they won't go, maybe other people won't be interested in the same thing I'm interested in. Maybe I'm interested in an open clearing, and I think other people are interested in an easy to access temple that they can slap next to what they need. So it may not make a difference. I think it definitely adds a layer to the game that is worthwhile, but I'm still not willing to say anything about the base game not being an interesting little strategy game. On the level of a Carcassonne, it's a light game at that level. What's wrong with it? Well, other people have pointed this out. There's no question. In fact, Left-Handed Reviews puts this. He puts it as an AP. To me, it's not AP. It's the counting issue, together with, you have all these different choices, all these different things you can look at and you can optimize among. And there are a lot of choices. And it gets to be a real problem, as he pointed out, if you have to backtrack. My feeling is this is an excellent game to play with the you move a piece, you moved it. You do something, you did it. That might slow some people down, but I know it would help me because I will tend to just do with this game. With other games, I wouldn't. With other games, I would be constantly calculating my moves. You do have to keep track of being able to count to 10 and remember that. That's tough on camera. That's tough maybe when there's a bunch of people around you talking. But there's easy enough solutions. You can use little counters for that. Probably a good idea overall. I feel almost no AP to this, no real AP. I feel like I don't have to make the calculations, which gets rid of the AP. I feel like it's usually very simple to look at the board and see my opportunistic choices. And, like you don't move your queen into danger for no good reason in chess. There are a lot of bad choices out there, but it's usually pretty clear that you can narrow it down to a couple of good ones. And then with a little bit of investigation, you can figure out which one fits your current play strategy well. However, on the other hand, if I did want to calculate, the calculation level isn't that heavy. The fact that I can absorb it and make this from the gut decision very easily. It's not a huge complex situation where you can make those decisions from your gut very easily, like most war games are. Or at least break it into little pieces, each of which is simple calculations. It's something where I feel like you could just, optimizing a single move is about equivalent to optimizing a small sector of a battlefield in an operational war game. So it's clearly within, I think, an easy capability of mine to fully calculate out what my optimal move would be. But I don't feel that necessity. I think it's simple enough that you don't really have to do that kind of calculation to usually be right. Now you can look and say, "Oh man, you made some big mistakes," and you can, "Sure, I'm sure I did." There's a certain level of, I'm playing to have fun rather than to absolutely make the best move. There's a trade-off in a game, okay? That trade-off is the effort you put in to win versus the fun value you get. And that's sort of a metagame aspect of it. But the whole game is more enjoyable for me if I don't have to put in a huge effort, if I can make those decisions from the gut. And I think this game and Carcassonne and Tannenberg and the OCS, I think these all play well into that. On the other hand, when I look at things like, Wealth of Nations, or Axis Empires, I felt like, or Galactic Empire, or a lot of other things, Race for the Galaxy, not Galactic Empire. I feel in some of those games, or Pax Porfiriana, which is on my mind because I was thinking Illuminati a while ago. I think a lot of those, Age of Renaissance definitely, Advanced Civ, but not Civilization, which is very easy. I just do some quick math on the calculator and I can see what my optimal purchase is. It might take a few moments. I think a lot of those push it to the point where I no longer can calculate and can't and it's not so complex that I think that I can. Right? So I think that I can calculate it all out. I think somebody a little bit more calmer than I am can. And I feel like I'm at a disadvantage for that. With a game like this, I would just be irritated by someone calculating it all out. But I guess I would be accepting of it if I had a pipe and a cup of tea and LARPers to watch or something like that while I'm playing. I wouldn't want to be playing this in a serious game night with serious game players. That would really annoy me. This is too light a game for me to want to spend that kind of effort. I'm the same way with bridge. You know, I love bridge, but I don't play it the way serious bridge players would like to play it. All right. So anyway, though, I think there is room for someone who does want to make all those calculations, and it's not going to be that heavy a burden if they do. It really won't. Their turns will take 3 or 4 times what anyone else's, what anybody playing lightly's turn would be. But as long as you got people to joke around with, and as long as other people aren't upset that you weren't paying any attention during your turn because somebody else, or during other people's turn, I'm okay and wouldn't mind playing it under those circumstances. Fun game, but it has nothing to do with the theme it presents. The decisions are just a math optimization. But still, enjoyable for what it is. All right.